INFJs are often seen as kind, thoughtful, and deeply emotional people. They care about others, they try to help when they can, and they think a lot about what's right and what's real. But for all their positive traits, there are times when people don't respond well to them. Some even pull away or form a negative opinion of them without a clear reason. This usually leaves the INFJ confused. They weren't trying to upset anyone. They weren't being rude. In fact, they may have been trying their best to connect. So why do people sometimes dislike them? The answer lies in certain habits INFJs develop. These habits aren't meant to hurt others. Most of them come from a deep place of emotion, reflection, and personal protection. But to the outside world, they can come across as strange, distant, or even difficult. It's not that the INFJ is a bad person. It's that the way they protect themselves, express themselves, or search for meaning can confuse others. And when people don't understand something, they often react with distance or dislike. This video is about those habits. Not to shame them, but to explain them. Because the more aware INFJs are of how their actions affect others, the better chance they have at building honest and lasting relationships. Let's explore the odd habits that may push people away, without the INFJ even realizing it. Habit number 1. They overanalyze everything. INFJs are constantly thinking, not just about what happened, but about what it meant. They don't let things go easily. A short conversation might turn into hours of reflection. A change in someone's tone might lead to a deep internal debate. They don't just hear what was said, they search for what wasn't said. This habit comes from their intuition. INFJs are always picking up small signals. They can sense when something feels off, even if nothing looks wrong on the outside. But instead of brushing that feeling away, they dive into it. They want to understand why. And in trying to understand, they analyze every detail. To them, this seems normal. They're just being thoughtful. They're just trying to connect the dots. But to the people around them, it can feel overwhelming. When an INFJ brings up a tiny detail from a past conversation and asks what it meant, the other person might feel accused. They might feel like they're being picked apart or judged. Even if the INFJ isn't angry, the other person may hear suspicion where there is only curiosity. It can also be exhausting. Friends, partners, or co-workers may feel like they have to walk on eggshells, always thinking about how the INFJ might interpret things later. They might start hiding how they feel or avoiding certain topics just to avoid another long analysis. This habit also makes INFJs second-guess themselves. They don't just overanalyze others, they overanalyze their own actions too. Did I say the right thing? Did I make it awkward? Did I come off too strong? This creates a lot of internal pressure, and that pressure often spills into relationships. People want to feel accepted. They want to feel safe being themselves. But around an INFJ who constantly reads between the lines, they might not feel that. Even though the INFJ is just trying to understand, their habit of digging deep can make others feel like they're under a microscope. In close relationships, this habit can create emotional distance. The INFJ may ask too many questions, bring up old issues too often, or look for problems that aren't really there. Over time, the other person may feel drained. Not because they don't care, but because they're tired of feeling like they have to explain everything twice. INFJs don't need to stop analyzing. It's part of who they are. But they may need to practice asking themselves when it's helpful and when it's just causing confusion. Sometimes, not everything has to be solved. And sometimes, letting go is a better way to protect the connection. Habit number 2. They withdraw without explanation. One of the most common habits INFJs have is pulling away when they're overwhelmed. It doesn't always happen suddenly. Sometimes it's a slow fade. They stop replying to texts. They cancel plans. They don't answer phone calls. Other times, it's immediate. They disappear emotionally or physically with no warning. To the INFJ, this feels necessary. Their inner world gets full. The emotions they carry, both theirs and others, start to pile up. Their mind needs silence. Their heart needs space. And so they step back. They don't do it to punish anyone. They're simply trying to survive. But to the people around them, this can feel confusing or even hurtful. Imagine having a good conversation with someone and then not hearing from them for days. Or feeling close to someone, only to have them suddenly go quiet. Most people will assume something is wrong. They'll feel rejected, ignored, or even abandoned. What makes it harder is that INFJs often don't explain why they're pulling away. They don't like showing weakness. They don't want to burden others. And sometimes they can't even put their feelings into words. So instead of saying anything, they just go silent. This habit creates space, but not always in a good way. The other person is left with questions. Did I do something wrong? Are they mad at me? Are they done with the friendship? And because INFJs don't usually offer clear answers, the silence becomes louder than any conversation. Over time, this habit can damage trust. Even people who care about the INFJ might stop reaching out. Not because they don't care, but because they're tired of not knowing where they stand. They don't want to guess anymore. They want clarity. In romantic relationships, this withdrawal can be especially painful. A partner might feel close one moment and completely shut out the next. They may offer support, only to feel like the INFJ doesn't want it. And after enough cycles of this, they may give up trying. INFJs may not realize how this habit affects others. They think they're just taking time to feel better. But what they don't see is the emotional gap they're creating. This doesn't mean INFJs need to stop taking space, but they can try to explain it better. Even a short message can help. I need a little time alone, but it's not about you. That one sentence can keep someone from feeling unwanted or pushed away. With a little more communication, this habit doesn't have to break connections. It can actually protect them. Habit number 3. They expect others to get them without saying much. NFJs often feel misunderstood. They think deeply, feel intensely, and notice things others don't. But they don't always express those things openly. Instead, they hope that the people close to them will just know how they feel, what they need, or when something is wrong. They expect emotional sensitivity from others, even if they don't ask for it directly. If they're feeling hurt, they may not say it out loud. They'll just pull back and hope someone notices. If they need support, they might not request it. They'll wait for someone to offer. To the INFJ, this feels fair. They are often tuned in to other people's emotions, and they expect the same level of awareness in return. They assume that if they can read between the lines, others should be able to do the same. But that's not how most people work. Most people aren't mind readers. They don't catch every small shift in tone or expression. They don't know how to interpret silence or how to respond to a vague comment about being tired. They need direct communication, and INFJs don't always give it. This creates frustration on both sides. The INFJ feels invisible. They think, why can't they see that I'm struggling? Meanwhile, the other person feels like they're being set up to fail. They're expected to respond to signals they never saw, or fix a problem they didn't know existed. This habit puts stress on relationships. Friends and partners may feel confused or even guilty. They know something's wrong, but they don't know what it is. And when they ask, the INFJ might say, "It's fine," when it clearly isn't. This emotional guessing game wears people down. Over time, people may start to pull away. They feel like they can never do enough, say the right thing, or meet expectations they can't see. They start to dislike the feeling of being tested without being told they're in a test. INFJs don't mean to create this pressure. They're just hoping for emotional connection without having to explain everything. But in most relationships, communication is key. People need to hear what's real in order to respond with care. INFJs can still be subtle. But when it comes to needs, boundaries, or pain, saying something is better than saying nothing. Being clear doesn't make the feeling less deep, it just makes it easier for others to support them. When INFJs stop expecting people to just know, and instead start sharing even small truths, they open the door for real understanding. And they reduce the risk of being disliked for being too hard to figure out. Habit number 4, they hold people to high standards quietly. INFJs value truth, loyalty, and emotional honesty. They don't just want people around, they want real, honest, thoughtful people around. Because of this, they hold others to high standards. But the problem is, they don't always speak those standards out loud. They expect people to show up in consistent, respectful, and meaningful ways. They expect effort, depth, follow-through. But instead of explaining what they expect, they watch. They notice. They track patterns. And when someone falls short, they take note, but they often say nothing. This quiet judgment can create tension. Others may feel like they're constantly disappointing the INFJ, even if they're doing their best. They sense something is wrong, but they're not told what. They feel the distance, but not the reason. To the INFJ, holding people accountable without speaking is a way of protecting peace. They don't want drama. They don't want to fight. They just want people to act in ways that match their words. But because they don't voice their disappointment, the people around them don't get a chance to fix anything. Eventually, this leads to quiet disconnection. The INFJ stops replying as quickly. They stop sharing. They pull back from the relationship, often without a clear explanation. The other person feels confused and possibly disliked, but doesn't know why. This habit also creates emotional walls. When someone breaks trust or crosses a line, the INFJ may forgive on the outside, but close the door emotionally. They may keep the friendship going, but the depth is gone. And the other person feels the coldness without ever knowing what caused it. INFJs believe in giving people space to grow. But when they never voice what went wrong, they deny others the chance to improve. And when someone doesn't meet their silent standards, the INFJ may write them off, without giving them a fair chance. People want to feel trusted. They want to know what matters to their friends. But INFJs often wait too long to share those values. And when someone finds out what mattered only after they've lost the INFJ's trust, it's too late. To keep strong connections, INFJs can practice speaking their expectations gently. A simple sentence like, "It means a lot to me when people follow through," can go a long way. It invites understanding instead of assuming it. INFJs don't need to lower their standards. But if they want people to meet those standards, they need to show them where the bar is. Otherwise, people will keep missing, and eventually, they'll stop trying. Habit number 5. They create emotional tension via hints or paradox. INFJs often express themselves in layers. They rarely say things straight out. Instead, they use suggestion, contradiction, or half-truths to make a point. They may drop a comment that sounds casual but carries weight, or say something that means more than it seems. This habit comes from their deep emotional awareness. They see patterns and truths that others don't. But instead of stating them clearly, they wrap them in emotional tension. They hint. They challenge, they speak in paradox. They want people to think deeper, but not everyone is ready for that. To the INFJ, this is how they share insight. They believe people learn best when they discover meaning on their own. So they leave clues. They say things like, "Funny how silence speaks louder than words," when what they really mean is, "I feel ignored and it hurts." They may also ask questions that seem off topic or bring up ideas in a roundabout way. To them, it's tricky, but to others, it can feel manipulative, confusing, or even passive-aggressive. People don't like feeling tested. They want directness, especially when something emotional is at stake. And when an INFJ chooses hinting over honesty, it can make others feel like they're being pulled into a mind game. This is especially hard for people who aren't used to abstract thinking. They don't understand what the INFJ is getting at. They feel like they're being led down a path with no clear purpose. And they start to feel defensive or annoyed. Over time, this habit creates emotional distance. The INFJ thinks they're creating connection, but the other person feels like they're being pushed into confusion. And when people don't feel safe, they disconnect. INFJs don't need to give up their depth or their way of seeing the world, but they can work on making their meaning clearer. They can say, "That hurt my feelings," instead of wrapping it in a puzzle. They can speak more plainly, even if it feels uncomfortable. Emotional insight is powerful, but if no one understands it, it loses its value. INFJs are masters of subtlety, but sometimes the strongest message is the simple one. Habit number 6. They insist on depth even when not asked. INFJs are not comfortable with small talk. They don't enjoy talking just to pass time. They want their conversations to matter. Even in casual settings, they're often looking for a deeper connection, a shared truth, or a moment of emotional honesty. And because of that, they often bring depth into places where others don't expect or want it. This can make people uncomfortable. Imagine being at a casual gathering, talking about everyday things, and then the INFJ suddenly says something deeply personal or reflective. It might catch others off guard. It might feel like too much, too soon. People might not know how to respond, so they pull back or change the subject. This habit doesn't come from a need for attention. It comes from the INFJ's natural curiosity and emotional depth. They want to understand people beneath the surface. They want to know what drives someone, what keeps them awake at night, what matters most to them. They want real connection, not just polite interaction. But most people aren't used to that. They have learnt to keep things light. They expect emotional conversations to come slowly after trust is built. When the INFJ skips ahead, it can feel intense or intrusive. Sometimes the INFJ isn't even trying to go deep, it just happens. Their tone, their eyes, their choice of words all carry weight. Even a simple question from them can feel like an invitation into something more serious. And people who aren't emotionally prepared for that may back away. This habit can also show up in work or social circles. While others are focused on tasks or fun, the INFJ might bring up bigger questions or express concern about things others avoid. They may question the purpose behind actions. They may highlight emotional truths that others would rather ignore. And while this can be powerful, it can also feel uncomfortable to those who aren't on the same wavelength. People may say the INFJ is too intense, or too serious, or too emotional. But what they're really saying is, "I don't know how to handle this depth right now." And instead of saying that out loud, they distance themselves. They avoid the INFJ. They choose comfort over confrontation. This leads to the INFJ feeling rejected for being real. They were just trying to connect. But because their way of connecting goes deeper than most people expect, they end up being pushed away. INFJs don't need to stop being deep, but they can learn to read the room better. Not everyone is ready for intense connection right away. Sometimes giving people space to open up slowly creates a safer path to honesty. The INFJ's gift is depth. But depth works best when it's offered, not forced. And when people feel invited, not overwhelmed, they're more likely to stay. INFJs are full of emotion, insight, and quiet strength. But even the most well-meaning traits can become habits that push people away when they're misunderstood. Whether it's overanalyzing, pulling back without warning, expecting others to read their minds, holding silent standards, using emotional hints, or diving too deep too fast, each of these habits has an impact. Not because they're bad, but because most people don't know how to respond to them. The truth is, many of these habits come from good intentions. They're ways of staying safe, building trust, or connecting honestly. But if INFJs want to be understood and not disliked, they need to balance their inner world with clear communication. It's not about changing who they are. It's about making space for others to meet them halfway. Because when INFJs are seen and accepted, their deepest qualities can become their strongest gifts. So if you're an INFJ who feels disliked or avoided, ask yourself, is it them? Or is it one of these habits? And then take one small step toward clarity. Sometimes that's all it takes to turn distance into connection.